We'll see if we can find Ollie somewhere in the cyberspace.
I am right here, Magnus.
Wonderful. Let's see if we can get to see you. I don't see you. I think I still see Eric's slides. I don't know. Linda, oh, now. There you are. Great.
Here I am.
Welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Always inspired to hear Eric talk about how we got to from an idea to Orbit MI.
Excellent. So why don't you take us to the next step of the journey?
Absolutely. And I think I'll just make it a personal story and share exactly, how I got involved. And through that, demonstrate some really key concepts that are very important, I think. Um, I have been an entrepreneur. I worked for large companies like Novartis and CSC and started my startup career in uh, 2001 with initial company that we built and sold to Microsoft, and the second one built and sold to ServiceNow. And for the last 4 or 5 years, I was investing in companies and also teaching at different places like Stanford University, which is where I met with the Stena folks. And actually, I was talking about being data driven for non-native enterprises, whereas it's very natural for Spotify and for Amazon to be data driven. How does a traditional company and somebody that has history back 135 years and 75 years in current shape and form for like Stena, how do they become data driven? So when I then connected with the Stena folks at the time, they told me that they have done just that. They have asked themselves some really important questions. What is big data? What is artificial intelligence? Where is the cloud? And how can that help them be more efficient, be more profitable, and be more sustainable? And I think that is, if we were to write a book about this, I said, if unless the leadership asks those curious questions, very little is possible. It ends up being very little projects tinkering around in different departments, and like little day flowers. They grow up in the morning and die by the evening, and just a waste of time. You might as well not bother. So I was first and foremost very impressed by the leadership actually asking themselves questions. As I worked with financial services, I worked with life sciences. I've never worked with maritime. Frankly, maritime has always been a little scary to me. What are these huge iron buckets, traveling around the world, carrying 90% of all of our goods that we consume? Huge part of health of the world is to look at the maritime business, and you'll know how things are happening and what will happen. But at the same time, it's a industry that's run in very non-digital way. So in my experience, we would focus on financial services or life sciences. But when I started to meet with Stena people and understand that they were ahead of their time, but also that they had leadership support and deep curiosity for how to use these new concepts, new science to be better. And then I saw the product and I realized that they had done some things right. One of the things they did right is to actually work with HTEC, and I'll just say that straight out. I think people don't understand when they're picking a partner for product development that just like an engineer, there's many different types. Just like a doctor, there's many different types. You don't go to a dentist if your leg has broken. You can, but it's not going to be very productive. So just like that, HTEC is designed to build products. It's not a help desk company. It's not going to come in, and it can if you want to, but they're designed to build sustainable, enduring, productive, products that are globally scalable. So somebody was very smart, or somebody got very lucky, but Stena connected with HTEC. But back to the going from curiosity to action, I believe that when I looked at Orbit, I saw some really important best practices in place. And I'm not just talking good about Orbit. Obviously, we all already love Orbit and it's doing really well. But just for everybody's key learning, things that we teach in the universities is best practices. And if you think about Orbit, and you think about somebody saying, hey, okay, what are these big concepts, what are these emerging technologies, and how does that apply to us? It then needs to articulate itself into guiding principles, aspirations. Now, Eric has an aspiration that holographically a ship will come up from the table and he can swirl it around, click in the machine room, connect with the captain, first officer, whatnot, even look around the ship, see what's happening, and that will happen. And we will always strive to make that happen. But there's so many advancements to even get to that possibility. That's what had to come in place, because if you don't connect the dots, you'll never get to a holistic understanding. So these guiding principles, what are they? Well, sometimes people build a piece of technology, and sometimes they build an enduring technology. And piece of technology is like, hey, I need to just fix something. Let's put these things together. Let's give me an index, give me a database, put the stuff in there. Let's do a ability to search on that database, and I have solved something. And then, but it's not going anywhere. You just created a point solution that has a start and finish date. What Stena together with HTEC did that I was very impressed with, which led me to be, very interested in being part of this journey, was that they asked themselves some important guiding principles, such as A, try not to use hardware. Try to really use these technologies at the edge of their capability, so that when you're implementing it and using it, you don't have to drag the hardware component with it. Now, anybody who knows maritime knows that vessels don't really want another box. and for a vendor to onboard vessels, you have to do a lot of vessel chasing around the world, right? Eric mentioned that 99.9% of a business is outside Sweden. So it's a global business, definitely. The other one was that it has to serve many different departments. It can't be just in chartering, just in bunkering, just in energy management, and so on and so on. But these are very important, that it cuts across different departments. Now, for me, that is alpha omega when it comes to breaking silos and building workflows. So a little bit history on software is that, unfortunately, the way software development works in a corporation is that we solve problems like a whack-a-mole, right? We have a problem in the claims department. We go fix that with a little bit technology and a lot of manual work. We have a challenge or an opportunity in chartering. We go there, we do that, and then it just stays there. And when we do that, we actually put data into a index, a silo, if you like, and then we provide security and all kinds of capabilities on that silo, and that silo gets bigger and thicker. And now that information is trapped. And real data driven means that data is outside these silos and is actually feeding a workflow. We don't work with database for the sake of database. We don't work with data warehousing for the sake of data warehousing. We work with technology and data because we have a workflow. We go from a proposal to a contract to post fixture. We go from a signal that a vessel needs attention to understanding what's going on with the vessel, fixing, sharing, communicating, and then recording that whole event. These are workflows. That's how human beings work. We don't work inside a database for the sake of database. So the idea of actually looking across divisions, creating this collaboration has a incredible benefit when the regulatory comes in. Regulators don't care about your organizational structure. Regulators don't care that your head of claims department doesn't want to share information with the head of energy department. The form you have to fill in takes data from many different areas, and that becomes a form. And that's what happened in the financial services world with Dodd-Frank regulatory. That's what happened in life sciences when in the late 90s, it started with generic substitution parallel trade and a lot more rigorous reporting around clinical trials. And now this is happening in maritime industry and it's forcing people to actually produce data and forms across the organization. Now, if you don't have those tools and all these departments are existing in silos, the work that you have to do to collate that information requires another department called compliance department. But if you have information that actually has these things, then people can auto-populate these and auto-distribute them. And that allows you to actually, instead of struggling with regulatory, to use that as advantage, which is what Stena is doing now, right? Is that they're on top of it. So the guiding principles were also beyond this, that it has to be extendable. What does that mean? That means that if Eric has an idea, or his team members have an idea, or there's a challenge, then they go to Orbit first and say, okay, what data sets we already have? What workflows do we already have? What do we need? What's the gap analysis? And you add the things that you're missing instead of starting from scratch. And in hours and days, you can actually innovate. You can iterate. You can test. You can ask what if statements. So instead of running around and putting together data and figuring out who's what, you actually get to the actionable stage immediately. And that's called extendability. And I think the last part, which I think is just, I admired probably the most, is that there was a lot of care between Stena and HTEC about user experience. You know, Eric mentioned that, it's very important to bring everybody on board. He mentioned a train, I'll say a vessel, I'll say a boat. It's very important that software technology is used. If people are not using the technology, it doesn't matter how good it is. So how do people use technology? Well, you can force them, which most part of the world is not very easy. Or you can make their lives easier, give them personal benefit. So anybody who is feeling that they are constantly chasing data, constantly chasing information, constantly correcting things, instead of actually servicing their customers, personal development, collaborating with them, with the team members, there's a very different job experience, right? You have a very different life experience when you are constantly feeling that you're behind versus being ahead. And the goal of technology is not just to create incredible analytics and incredible graphs and all that stuff, but it's to make each individual person's life better, easier, and allow them enough time so they can grow. And so the idea around user experience, the UI UX part. UI is user experience, UX is the workflow underneath it, and the amount of effort that went into it. Now I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about corporate spin-offs versus startups. And every day we hear about these incredible startups and these people, unicorns and all that stuff. We have to remember there's 90% 999 failures for each one semi-successful startup. In fact, I will tell you that recent data, I'll read it to you, that Bloomberg US spin-off index has produced a total return of 973% since its inception in December 31st, 2002. Now, guess what the S&P 500 index was in the same period? In interest of time, I'll answer my own question. 342. So corporate spin-offs are 3x more successful than a normal S&P index. Now, startups are even less successful, right? So why? And I think that's the beauty of Orbit and Stena and HTEC is that in order to build a real powerful technology that really works, you need to have a great combination of expertise in maritime, in this case in maritime, and technology. And you have to marry them. Very often when you have a startup coming out from nowhere, they will build an MVP. I don't like that word, full disclosure, because I think it's a dream breaker. You build an MVP, you raise some capital, you build an MVP, it does something well, but enterprises don't buy an MVP. Enterprises buy technology that has security like GDPR, single sign-on, is globally accessible. It's accessible on different type of devices. It has multiple functions. It's trainable. It has documentation. In order to build an enterprise software, it takes a lot of time and money. And if you look at financial services, one of the big areas in technology is fintech, financial technologies, the technologies that serve the financial services. Did you know that most of technology innovation that comes in the financial services world comes from the banks themselves? More from JP Morgan with 60,000 engineers to Goldman Sachs to Morgan Stanley and so many others. That's where a lot of technology innovation comes from. Now, I will share one more thing that really impressed me, and that was first what was impressed me was the insight of building Orbit. Right? Why did Stena build Orbit? Because there were either point solutions that they would have to buy, and now they have 6, 7, 8 more applications that they have to connect and development risk, and it take 2, 3, 4 years to do that, or they have to license some older platform that just doesn't have the innovation cycles required to face 2021, 2022, and so forth. So they were forced to build, in a way, Orbit, right? Now they did it with an open heart and a very vigorous approach. Kudos to them. So I'm very impressed by that insight. But I'm equally impressed by the foresight of knowing that a shipping company is a shipping company. While they can innovate and they will continue to innovate and they have a history and culture and tradition of innovation, in order for a piece of software to survive, it needs to surround itself in a software culture. What happens normally when Bank of America builds a technology or a Stena builds a technology is that they get all the experts in the organization to congregate, to group, to look at this problem and in a very intense way apply all their expertise and then create what actually will work. But then they go on to the next project and the next project, right? Because that's not their culture. Is to every day what we're doing is to every day we are doing sprints. Every day we're working on the product. Oracle spends 25, 30% of their revenue on R&D is because software actually needs that type of investment to keep fresh, to keep the APIs going, to keep the data, new data sets integrated, to have all kinds of new devices that it needs to be able to render on. So the foresight to say, in order for Orbit to continue to deliver value and for it to actually increase its value all the way to the big dreams of Eric, it has to be inside a software culture where crazy software people like myself every day wake up and we continue to build and continue to build and continue to build on the core technology. So Orbit today is a global brand. We have clients and prospects and partners around the world. We are leveraging and really benefiting from the initial solid foundation, and we work with HTEC as close as you would think you have your own organization. I don't think Orbit and HTEC together think about themselves as separate teams. I think we think about ourselves as one team, and that's kudos to HTEC, kudos to Stena, but also the way it needs to be, because in order to continue to innovate, we have to have an extreme intimacy on where we are and where we need to go. So it's been a great journey. We just got started and we have a long way to go. But this is a great example of many important concepts: leadership support, innovation versus prioritization, guiding principles, finding the right engineering, and continuing to demand more and more out of that piece of technology that you have. All of this is, I think it should be a book one day, but all of these are great examples.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ollie. A question for you. We don't have anyone on the chat. You feel free to drop questions on the chat, guys. But so I was wondering, and Eric touched on that as well. It's like leaving your kids, to spin out a company from your corporate. I mean, do you think there are a lot of cases where corporates are in a good position to actually spin out things, but they don't know how to do it?
There is a what worked for us. Let me start there. Was that I think from me and my team, let's say the OrbitMI team, when we were discussing and learning and engaging, and I think the starting point was that everybody was very honest and open. It wasn't any hidden agenda. There was just a bunch of curiosity, and of course I don't really look like it, but I was born and raised in Norway. I grew up watching Stena ferries around me nonstop, so I knew about Stena and I knew about their reputation for quality and professionalism and all these things. I mean, this is the first shipping company to put their big name on their vessels and say, we will swim and sink with our quality. So we knew that already in Scandinavia about their focus. But the starting point was very, I come from, they met me through an academic forum. So it was a very good platform to actually exchange and learn from each other. And the second part was that as much as I had to learn about the maritime world, the willingness and curiosity of the Stena folks around what is a software company? How is that run? What does that take? What are the components of critical success factors of that? And I think that a lot of people are, they fail when they are imposing their world on the other one. I think good things happen when we become curious about each other's world and we want to learn from each other and say, what is your reality like, right? So for example, one thing I knew and I learned was that Stena is ahead of the pack. But I also knew, and we did a study with London School of Economics to confirm that, was that because of regulatory requirements, everybody's going to be forced to do it. So, and today we talk about things like CRM, customer relationship management. But back in the days, there was no company selling CRM. There were corporations creating their own digital Rolodexes. I remember even at Ciba Geigy and Novartis, we called it Field Force Reporting System. And then somebody said, okay, this actually could be used across many people, so why don't we productize it? And some things were spun off these big companies, and some things were built from ground up. And now we're seeing that in maritime industry, you know. And Orbit is one of several great examples of technologies that will help build a more cohesive and productive and sustainable maritime industry. But that's the history repeats itself, and it's fascinating for me to be part of it the third time. First time with life sciences, second time with financial services, and now in deep waters with maritime.
Wonderful. Maybe we can ask Eric the same question, because I mean, there's first one effort to come to grip with the whole idea to kind of spin out your babies. But secondly, I guess you have to convince the owners of the companies to do that. Is that difficult, or was that difficult for you?
Yeah, I mean, it is to let something go. I mean, we are a private company, and we usually what we like we keep for ourselves. But I think with this journey, I mean, everyone realized quite early that if we're going to do something with this, we cannot continue to develop ourselves. And it took some while to convince our owner about it. But you know, he's also in other parts of digital development. So it was, I would say, relatively easy to get that going.
Okay, great. Yeah, my view at least is that we are in Sweden and actually in Europe, but specifically in Sweden, we are very kind of poor in spinning out things from corporates. If you compare to US, I think there's much more kind of successful cases to find that. So do you think that we have to also learn collectively in our part of the world to play with those things?
Yes, absolutely. I think you're completely right there. And I think, well, Sweden as a country that actually develop a lot and where we are quite creative and innovative. I think we could do a lot more on it. But I don't think we are bad, but I think we could definitely do more.